Your Excellency, sir, can you tell us about yourself and your diplomatic background? What is the life of an ambassador like? Has being an ambassador affected your private life?
Well, good afternoon and welcome to RWANDA Embassy. And it's a pleasure having sisters and brothers from African continent, African descent. It's always a pleasure for me to have a conversation with people who are passionate about Africa. The voice of Africa has been unheard by the world because it is told by other people. More often than not, it is distorted. The reason why I thought I should create time for us to have this conversation is precisely because I know that you have that passion of ensuring that the African story is told. And the African story is not about the products we are trying to help us promote so that we achieve economic prosperity, but telling the story of humanity and the value we bring to the world in many different aspects. It's quite interesting because I was educated and trained and worked as a civil engineer. So my trade is construction, essentially. So, but if you know a bit of a history of my country, Rwanda, we went through so much. We have had cycles of conflict and unresolved ethnic divisions emanating from bad leadership. Just briefly to give you that perspective, which culminated into the 1994 genocide that was committed against one group, the Tutsi population. We lost 1 million people in senseless kind of killings. And ever since that time in 1994, we tried to recover quickly. In the aftermath of genocide, we were all working to rebuild our country and heal the society. So all of us were contributing towards that. In the first few years, about 8-9 years, I worked in my field as a civil engineer, leading housing construction, reconstruction, rehabilitation, because everything was destroyed during the genocide. So since I had a bit of my career focusing in that field, but because the human capital base that time was very narrow, and so many doctors, engineers and other professions were called to serve, not necessarily in the areas of qualification or expertise. So I found myself kind of doing politics and not construction, because then I became the provincial governor 2 times.
Wow, okay.
And that's when I started learning a few things about politics. After that, I was then appointed to be the ambassador of Rwanda to South Africa.
Wow. Okay.
Where I served, and I was so honored to represent my country there. And after a few years, about 3 years, I was transferred to the United States, where I served for 6 years in the same capacity. And later went back home briefly, worked for 1 year or so, and then I was posted to Kenya with the ambassador, and finished my tour there, and I was posted to China. So that has really been my journey. It's a journey of about 17 years as a diplomat, 27 years as a public servant, but 17 in diplomacy. It's quite an interesting career because you represent the interests of our country, but ensuring that the interests of the host are also taken care of. And So it's like any other public servant, but you exercise very high level of integrity, how you serve, you present your country, given the fact that you've been designated by your country to represent it in its interest to your jurisdiction. Because we call it jurisdiction because here in China, I cover China first and foremost, but also I cover Vietnam, Pakistan, and North Korea. So we call ourselves the ambassadors of two and non-resident ambassadors of two. So ambassador of Rwanda to China and non-resident ambassador of Rwanda to Vietnam, Pakistan, and North Korea.
Pakistan as well. Okay.
Yes, and throughout that journey, if I count where I have covered 16, even though I've been stationed to 4, I have covered 16 because when I was in South Africa, I was covering SADC, almost 8 countries. In the US, I was covering Brazil, Argentina, and Mexico. In Kenya, I was covering Kenya, Somalia, and Eritrea. So here I'm covering 3 more, so in total about 16. And all those countries have to go there and present, meet with the president, and other officials. So yes, it is a public service, but very unique in the sense that you deal with very sensitive sovereign matters of your country. And I should just add that, maybe without taking in so much details, that diplomacy also has evolved into something. In our generation, we have not really dealt with the issues of Cold War. The generation of diplomats, the current generation of diplomats, deal with the issues that make sense in our own situation. In terms of the impact you bring in your country, socio-economic transformation, so to say. So you're out there to strengthen your diplomatic relations, political, security, and all that. But on top of that, you want to make sure that you create wealth for your country in terms of investments and expanding market for your products. So you find that most of the time we spend in our diplomatic missions, we are dealing with those issues that make sense to our people in terms of creating opportunities of education, various technology transfer, marketing of our products, and mobilizing investments from the respective jurisdictions to your respective countries. So it's kind of changed. Initially, it was a kind of intelligence entities, because of the Cold War. But the current diplomatic engagement is all about business, trade, education, health, cooperation, climate change, and all other issues that are important to the world. So that's the work of diplomats, what you do as an ambassador.
What is your greatest accomplishment during these 27 years?
Well, as I said in my earlier submission, we talk about building, strengthening diplomatic, political cooperation, ensuring security for our country, and then economic diplomacy. Yeah. So I should say that if I have a good recollection of what I have achieved, is that I have, wherever I have served, I have ensured that our diplomatic relations have gone to another level, by ensuring that you present the correct message of what you are doing and how you perceive and look at friends through mutual respect and mutual interest. So by the time I left USA, South Africa, Kenya, I believe, and I'm very convinced without any fear of contradiction, that I have moved our relationship to another level, of course, supported by my leaders. The other thing is to bring home investors. I can count few that I was able to mobilize and tell them the true story, show them the potential opportunities for investment, and that makes you feel so proud when you see something happening that is based on your engagement. And the other thing is, of course, marketing our products to the foreign markets. I showed people that I've been here in China 2 years. I've seen growth in exports of our products based on the efforts that we have put in engage.
What kind of products, if I may ask?
Yeah, in China we currently bring in coffee, chili, and tea, and we are looking for more other products. And when I came here, I really had to focus on making sure that we increase our presence, because every time we spoke about conflict, it was about Brazil, Colombia, Ethiopia, Kenya, but Rwanda and Congo was not really so known. But now we are happy to say that the consumers are getting, are showing a lot of interest in buying Rwandan products.
Thank you, His Excellency, for giving us this your experience. Rwanda is gaining prominence in news headlines across the world for every reason other than negatives. There is a boost in productivity, energy, lifestyle, and progress in governance and foreign investment. What has led to this massive development?
Well, that's a very good question, and it's a question that constantly asked by so many people across the world. Because historically, whenever you have a conflict, a very serious conflict like what we had in Rwanda, it's very difficult to talk about progress, prosperity, and unity. Creating a state that serves everyone, and be able to work together to change your livelihoods. For this to happen, there must be one reason behind it. Because we have seen in so many cases where people get out of conflict and before they settle down, we have another conflict, another conflict. The history tells us that that's what has been happening. In Rwanda, the unique story of Rwanda is the fact that we've gone through so much, but we have been able in a very short period of time to come together and build a state that's very effective and competitive and has generated a lot of opportunities and positive value. This is happening because of leadership. That's one important factor that people forget to even look at when they are discussing some of these cases. So particularly in Rwanda, the reason why you see all these stories, Rwanda is number one in terms of ease of doing business, is number one in terms of safety, number one in terms of competitiveness, number one in terms of gender empowerment, number one in terms of youth empowerment, number one in every aspect of national life. It is precisely because of good leadership that Rwanda has, and we are very proud of our president. We're very proud of what he has done, and it is very inspiring to see that there is that high sense of ownership of this project called Rwanda Transformation, which has attracted the attention of people old and young to contribute to this story. So you find Rwanda in that kind of optic that shows you that the country can recover from a terrible situation and be able to be in the news in a positive way compared to the negative. But of course, there are distractors who will definitely tell their stories looking at few aspects of depending on what they think. We have been under massive, huge pressure from the Western countries because they believe that they have the right to actually dictate what we should do. They even believe that they have the best model of democracy, the best model for economic development, that some of our countries should go and copy and paste in their own situation, and that's how the world should be. We should conduct business, and Rwanda has been very clear that we need partnerships, we need support, we need to work with the rest of the world. We can't be viable when you are alone, and nobody is viable when he or she is alone in terms of countries. And so this kind of the mastery mindset and the mentality of subjugation to the African continent is what we resist, like Rwanda, and that has somehow kept us in some negative kind of conversation when we are trying to push back. And I think many African countries are saying, you know what, this is a time for us to define and shape our destiny. And that kind of doctrine is what has made Rwanda to move faster. Against all those odds, we've been able to move faster because of the leadership that has this vision of saying, we are not going to go back into politics of identity. We are not Hutus or Tutsis, we are all Rwandans. We believe that we can only succeed if we work together. That's what drives our leadership, that's what drives our country, that's why it drives the young people especially, because they are the owners of the future, the future of the country. So I should say that in the absence of leadership, it's very difficult to recover and be able to make positive progress.
Thank you, His Excellency.
Is Rwanda conquered? What are the major languages in Rwanda? Can you tell us the story of Rwanda that is not known to people, especially as relating to the culture?
Well, Rwanda was colonized by Belgium. So English is spoken. French is spoken there, and we introduced English. So Rwanda, if you want to use Franco-Anglo, so Rwanda was considered a Francophone country because it was colonized by the French-speaking. But our government introduced English precisely because we understood what the world needs, that you cannot transact with the rest of the world using English. Of course, French is also an important language, but introduced English, which made Rwanda to be more or less a bilingual country where we have young people who are able to speak English and French. But we have our own language, which is a core language for every citizen from the president to the farmer.
Wow.
So, unlike most of the African countries where you have so many languages, here our situation is totally different. You speak one language in the whole country, same culture, same tradition, same ethics, same everything. So that's a language that actually, if you want to address the nation, you use. You speak to everyone, those who went to school and those who didn't. They understand because they their mother tongue, and so those are the three languages that are spoken. Now we have the fourth one, which is Swahili. It is an East African kind of a language that is becoming very important. It's an official language now in our respective countries in East Africa, but also at the African Union level. And the majority of people from Eastern Africa, part of Africa, they speak that language. But to your last part of the question that you asked on the story that's not always told, it's related to what I just said. You see, because of what happened in Rwanda in 1994, the genocide indeed happened and 1 million people were killed. There is a sense in which people think about Rwanda as an ethnic kind of divided country with one group called Hutu and another one called Tutsi. So that story is always clouded by the belief that all African countries have tribal conflicts and ethnic conflicts and all that. But as I just explained, there is no any scientific evidence whatsoever to explain ethnicity in Rwanda. Political scientists would say that to define ethnicity of tribe, you have to refer to the type of a language, culture, tradition, practices, rituals, all those things that, make us different even though we are the same. In Rwanda, there's nothing like that.
Wow.
Even when we say the genocide was committed against the Tutsi population, it's a definition of a genocide according to the 1948 convention, which defines genocide, that is an act of, with the intent to exterminate in whole or in part a specific group of people based on their ethnicity, religion, race, and all that. In our situation, people were targeted because they were considered Tutsi, but the Tutsi-Hutu phenomenon is actually referred to us by political scientists as constructed identities, constructed because they were not there anyway. It is the colonial, masters who came and said, through the famous divide and rule tactic, how do we divide these people? If you, once you finish this interview, go to your Google and check, you'll find that they had to measure physical features for them to tell who is who.
Wow.
So they measure the length and width of your nose, and against the measurements, then they write your ethnic group. So Light-skinned, tall, long nose, thin nose, Tutsi. Stout, big, dark skin, big nose, short nose, Hutu. Yeah? So against the measurements, mind you, it's not about anything, not language, not anything. You are considered to be under that group. And people, it's very unfortunate that people believe in that story of being different based on measurements. Before that you were together, after being measured you are different, you believe in it to the point where you kill each other.
Wow.
How ridiculous is it? There is no region. There is no region for Hutu, there is no region for Tutsi. So this story sometimes is people become so simplistic by saying it's Hutu Tutsi kind of phenomenon that is very common on African continent. But in our case, that's why when I say so, I know my brother from Nigeria will say, how possible? How can an African country speak one language, the entire country? It's a very unique situation. It's a unique story that is not normally told by people. I think we have had all this conflict because we are not. Now you can see what colonization can do to a society. It's absurd. And you can trace back so many years, centuries, during different kingdoms. The monarchies that succeeded each other, you never find any single incident of Tutsis and Hutus fighting for anything. And they are considered to be Hutus and Tutsis because of their occupation. So the farmers are considered to be Hutu, and the cattle keepers are considered to be Tutsis, and those who are involved in handicrafts, Twas. So three tribes.
Wow.
Three ethnic groups. Not real ones. The real ethnic groups in Africa, they speak different languages, they practice different things. Maybe they live in the same territory, but they have different. I have lived in Kenya, I served in Kenya, as I told you. Or South Africa. I go to places and people speak different languages, they can't communicate even when they live in the neighboring districts because they're different tribes. In our case, nothing. So that's a story that's normally not told.
So then I must say, this makes you unique. And can I say that this is what made it easier?
Absolutely.
For you to move forward?
So I should say leadership first, because the successive post-independence regimes that were supposed to reverse that kind of division among our people, they actually, on the contrary, they perpetuated it. They made it worse. So the new leadership of our president, with that vision of uniting the country, they said, okay, before we even move forward, let's look at our history. What went wrong? What happened? So we started with that story. We were the same, not until these other foreigners came and measured our physical features and made us different, constructed our identities, put in the books, gave us ID cards, which said so and so, put so and so, Tutsi. Yeah, in the identity.
That's far?
Absolutely.
Up to the identity card?
Yes. So how do you think genocide happened? So you were
oh my God.
supposed to show your ID, and if you hit your ID, then you
I'm a debate. I want to preach.